I mean, we all know how this story started. Or do we? Hey folks, I just need to get this out of my system a little bit. So we are nearing the end of series 12 of Doctor Who, and there's a lot in theory to be wrapped up or brought back or touched on again or explained or what have you. To the point that I'm actually starting to wonder how much of it is going to get explained this year and how much of it's going to get rolled over to series 13. But in any case, the big overhanging question right now has to do with Jo Martin's Ruth Doctor, who I'm going to refer to because I don't know what else to call her right now. Now, I have done a little bit of speculation on her, and more specifically, I put together my arguments and my ideas that what made the most sense to me was that she came from some sort of split timeline, possibly as an alternative generation off of 11, because I mean, big, massive, whole new regeneration cycle, wonky stuff happened. That would have worked. Or something else along those lines where, it could have been 12 holding back the regeneration energy for so long. There are could have caused some sort of rift, some sort of splitting, some sort of duplication. However, a lot of the signifiers around this Doctor seem to indicate somebody from earlier on. The interior style of the TARDIS, the fact that she doesn't seem to be readily aware of the sonic screwdriver. I still don't read that scene as her not having a clue what it is, but just being more like, what do you need that for? But there is an argument to be said that maybe she just doesn't even know what it is in the first place, both of which would indicate somebody earlier on. Now, in that case, my own personal favor is still the Series 6B theory, which I went into detail in the other video, so you can look at that there. However, the big concern for a lot of fans, and it was a possibility I originally dismissed, and I still don't think it's going to be the case, but I really, really, really hope it isn't as well. But I'm going to talk about it because I feel like there's still a lot of thoughts going on around this, and I also kind of want to put this on the record either way, because either this will turn out to not be the case, in which case, I'll have a little record of, remember that time where I was silly and worried about something that didn't happen? Or it will end up being the case, and I'll have my initial thoughts on the record ahead of time. Not to say those thoughts won't change down the line. That's happened to me before, too. Anyways, so the idea of this being some version of the Doctor that actually predates William Hartnell. So a Doctor from even before the character we know as the first Doctor. I originally dismissed this based purely on logistics. The fact that her TARDIS is a police box. The TARDIS would have no reason to A, be a police box, and B, have a broken chameleon circuit where it would be stuck as a police box, because the entire background story is that the TARDIS had the chameleon circuit, which is supposed to change it into something that'll blend in anywhere, and landed in 1960s in England. It became a police box, chameleon circuit broke, and it stayed that way. That's the entire premise. So by that explanation, if she's prior to Hartnell, it would have no reason to be a police box. It hasn't landed in the 1960s yet. Now, I still hold to that, but for the moment, let's set aside the logistical argument and let's deal with why I think this would be a bad idea. It's not because, they'd just be making it so the Doctor was always a woman and they could try and claim that, A, I don't think so, and B, I don't care. I don't. I have problems with this idea that have nothing to do with what gender, color, whatever the Doctor is. So, for the purposes of this video, none of that's getting brought up. I don't care. Okay? Okay. So, my big fears have to do with a couple of things. The first and foremost is that retconning on this scale for something that has been running this long almost never goes well. If you want a good go-to, you can make the comparison to any number of comic book related stories. Comic books very frequently pull retcons, history revisions, and that's even separate from the fact that they reboot their continuities all the dang time, or DC especially. But it's always a landmine to go back and say, this thing that you know about a character you love isn't true, has never been true. And the longer the established knowledge has been in place that you're attempting to subvert, the more fraught the exercise is going to be. Because if you are flipping the script on a character who's been around a year, fine. 5 years, okay. 10, ooh, that's ballsy. Be careful. 20, 30, 50 years, and suddenly you're going to massively change the things that are going to alter the continuity and the understanding of the character, going all the way back to dang near 60 years ago. Just the number of pitfalls involved with doing that. And having a pre-Hartnell Doctor inherently does that. Regardless of the specifics of the explanation, exactly what is told to us or given or confirmed or whatever, if they confirm that Ruth is from before Hartnell, there are so many potholes for this thing to hit, so many pitfalls for it to just tumble into. Because when you go that far back and start messing with things, there's a lot of dominoes. You change this thing and it's got a knock-on effect. So whenever you are altering or retconning something that old, there are likely going to be a lot of unforeseen consequences that you can't account for, because it's not reasonable for any one human being to comb through literally 60 years worth of history and calculate every single bit of minutia that would be altered or affected or would be changed by this, and either A, account for it, or B, explain why it's now not going to be different. That's just unreasonable. But that's why you don't retcon that far back. Another thing that you can use as a comparison, think about things like alternate history fiction. A lot of alternate history fiction has divergent points at, say, World War II, or the Cold War. You don't get a lot of alternate history fiction around, say, the Crusades, around Alexander the Great. I mean, you get historical fiction, but not like we're saying that the world is split in this way. Or when you're dealing with alternate fiction, if it's modern set, where the split happened, it doesn't go that far back. It's like, Man in the High Castle. We're in a world occupied by the Nazis because we lost World War II. Going back under 100 years. Because the further back you go, the more changes you have to account for, and the less the world as we know it could possibly be the case. Because the knock-on effects from a change that far back just keep piling up. So that's the first thing. It's just a fraught idea. It's just a fraught concept. And the major thing with any retcon that you need to ask yourself, or any creator needs to ask themselves, what are we losing? What are we gaining? Because retcon is a bit of a dirty word, I feel like, in some fandoms, but there are many perfectly good retcons. It's just a question of whether what we're losing is less significant than what we gain. And if what we're losing is our entire understanding of who the Doctor is, how his life has been, and the fact that he became the character as we know him through his journeys off of Gallifrey, starting with the first Doctor, well, you're losing a lot. You're losing the entire understanding of the life progression of who this person was, where they came from, and how they grew the way they did. And what are we gaining by having Ruth or anyone be a pre-Hartnell regeneration? Now, some people will bring up the classic episode Brain of Morbius as a clue that they've hinted at pre-Hartnell regenerations before, and they did, but it's also backtracked since then, because Brain of Morbius was a classic era show that showed these faces that we'd never seen before, and it was implied that they were pre-Hartnell regenerations of the Doctor, but A, it was only implied, never confirmed, and B, it was said by the creators later, like, yeah, that was kind of what we were thinking later, but then later on we established the 13 regenerations rule, and we figured, that's not actually what it was. Was that the original intention? Yes. Did they stick with that plan? No! Because it just didn't make sense as Doctor Who kept going. That idea of regenerations pre-Hartnell didn't make sense anymore. So they dropped it, even though they'd implied it at the time. I've mentioned a number of things as comparisons so far, but I think the best comparison that I can make, if Doctor Who attempts to do this, attempts to give us a regeneration pre-Hartnell and say that they were always there, we just didn't know, would be to the Spider-Man clone saga. Because what Marvel tried to get away with, they introduced this Spider-Man clone. Well, there was a Spider-Man clone as part of a story from the 1970s, I think, who died at the end of the story, and that was it. 90s, they bring the clone back, shenanigans, cool, comic book nonsense. But then, what happened in the comics, and what was supposed to be, it was the plan, this was supposed to remain the case, was that it turned out the clone, Ben Reilly, was in fact the original Peter Parker the whole time. And the Peter Parker that we'd been following for the last 20-something odd years, from the point of when we first saw the clone in the 70s, was the clone the whole time. With Marvel having the intention that Peter would go off and be with MJ and have a home life, and now we'd be following Ben Reilly. And that was a hard enough pill to swallow at all, that they were trying to semi-retire Peter Parker and bring in this other Spider-Man. But it was honestly insulting that they went, oh, no, don't worry. That wasn't even actually Peter Parker. You didn't lose anything. Nothing changed. Of course it did. Because that's still the person we had all the investment in. And you just saying, well, it wasn't really Peter, so it's fine, right? No! That's not how attachment to characters and concepts works. I feel like I keep circling back to the same thing. You can justify it narratively all you want. That doesn't mean it'll land. So, the other thing about this is I can't think of any scenario. And when I say I can't think of something, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means literally what I say. I can't think of it. Maybe the people involved in this are cleverer than me and can think of it. But I can't think of any scenario that involves a regeneration of the Doctor pre-Hartnell that does not also involve some sort of memory wiping. Because the Doctor doesn't know who this is. So, if you're going to put in that the Doctor's had all these adventures and regenerations and lives, possibly a full cycle of 13, who the heck knows? prior to when we knew Hartnell, and something happened where it was all forgotten, then what's the point? It's a whole new set of adventures from a whole new set of characters who we don't know and whose existence didn't even impact the character we do know. Because it's not like we've learned more about how they've been. If the Doctor doesn't remember ever being these people, then effectively he never was. If his memory was completely wiped of being the Ruth Doctor or being whatever prior to the first Doctor, and he's gone however many thousands of years, because yes, I go by that, because when he was stuck in the confession dial, that was on a loop. It was a weird temporal thing. I don't count that, but fine, you want to count that? Fine. Billions of years old. And has had that entire life, that entire trajectory, without the knowledge of whatever happened before, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to who the Doctor is now. And I so help me God, if they turn this into, I don't even know who I am. Yes, you do! You've been here. You've been living. You know who you are. Ugh. So help me. If there's a line like that in the finale, I'm going to lose it. And that's my thing. I don't see what there is to be gained from this, if this is indeed what happens. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it is not what will actually happen. But I'm not going to lie, I am nervous. And we'll see. The problems, at least my problems, with having regenerations that are older than Hartnell. There they go. What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments and let's talk about it. Usual stuff, like, subscribe, share this around, support me on Patreon, check out my Instagram, etc., etc., Twitter, so on, so forth, or don't. You don't have to. I'd appreciate it, but end of the day, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.